Hello and welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm, brought to you by funkinstuff.net. This is the interview show that gets deep into the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I'm your host, Scott Goldfine, musicologist and author of Everything is on the One, the First Guide to Funk. If you don't have your copy, get on over to Amazon and pick one up. You'll be glad you did. Whether you're watching or listening on the audio podcast, as always, I thank you for your continued support. Another great episode, or episodes I should say, because this turned into quite an epic, talking to Mr. Larry Dunn, keyboard extraordinaire. Larry Dunn helped transform Earth, Wind & Fire into one of the all-time most successful R&B bands, with sales of more than 100 million albums worldwide, including 32 gold and platinum, multi-platinum singles and albums. Earth, Wind & Fire also collected 6 Grammys out of 13 nominations, 4 American Music Awards, a star in Hollywood's Walk of Fame, induction to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Songwriters Hall of Fame, and the Grammys Lifetime Achievement Award, among many other honors. In addition to playing organ, synthesizer, piano, and clavinet, Dunn served as the band's musical director. As one of the key people behind the scenes, much of the group's musical success can be attributed to him. He also rehearsed Earth, Wind & Fire for live stage performances and wrote many of the musical segues and medleys. He had major creative influence on such classics as Shining Stars, Spirit, Be Ever Wonderful, Running, See the Light, Let Me Talk, And Love Goes On, Jupiter, and so many other melodies that continue to live on in the hearts of fans and popular music lovers. Dunn's other production and performance credits include The Emotions, Level 42, Ronnie Laws, George Duke, Lenny White, Foley, Ramsey Lewis, Caldera, Hubert Law, Stanley Turrentine, Dan Reeves, Brian Culbertson, Dee Dee Bridgewater, Stanley Clarke, and Denise Williams. Since 1988, Dunn and his wife Louisa have been involved with production projects, writing music for Japanese television commercials, film, and studio work. He released his first solo album in 1996 called Lover Silhouette, and in 2008 released Into the Journey, which includes involvement of many of the high-profile artists just mentioned. Dunn also continues to perform, maintain a busy schedule. In fact, so busy that it took us months to get this hookup, but we made it happen. And once I got a hold of him, I wasn't going to let go. So this is a lengthy interview, but it's very rewarding. And if you go through the whole journey, Into the Journey, you will see Larry noodling on keyboards later on in his mothership, as it were, and also his lovely wife Louisa joins in. So be sure to stay through the whole duration. Glad you did. Amazing stuff with Mr. Larry Dunn coming right up now. I am truly delighted to welcome to Truth and Rhythm Mr. Larry Dunn, who from 1972 to 1983 served as a primary keyboardist and musical director for funk, R&B, pop music giants Earth, Wind & Fire. Larry, so good to have you join us. How are you?
Hey, Scotty, how you doing? I'm doing well.
Very good to hear. Coming to us from Southern California?
Los Angeles, California.
Yeah, so you're in the your mothership there, it looks like.
Yes, that's what they call it. the laboratory.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that we could finally connect. We've been trying for a while, so it's good that our schedule's lined up. Been really looking forward to this, so thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience.
As I've conveyed, big fan going all the way back, so it's truly an honor and looking very much forward to talking about your great career and history.
All the way back?
To that, well, as far as Earth, Wind & Fire goes. We'll find out what happened before that.
I was going to say, because you're not old enough.
Well, Larry, I'd like to start by talking about, where you grew up and how you first got into music, and sort of leading us up to just before connecting with Earth, Wind & Fire.
Well, still working on the growing up part, but I was actually born in Denver, Colorado.
And did you have a musical family, or what was that?
Absolutely. My first 2 years of my life was on a farm in Denver, Colorado. My grandparents, Nana and Papa, were Italian, Calabrese from Calabria. So Papa took the boat, I would imagine, and ended up in New York. And then I don't know how, but he immediately migrated to Colorado and started the farm. I think it was him and his brother, and then sent for Nana. And the first 2 years were on the farm with mom, my dad. My mom was Italian, my father was black. Mom, dad, my older brother Lonnie, and it was quite an experience. And they were musical. 2 years old, we moved suburbia, and mom and dad bought a house. Man, it was a great neighborhood. My dad played piano, guitar, and upright bass. And so we had a raggedy upright piano in the living room, and I used to beat on that. I was drawn to that like a moth to the light. And when I was about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, maybe 5, he taught me Blueberry Hill by Fats Domino. And then we would go to North Denver to hang with the Italians, and they'd have their guitars and they'd play Italian folklore. And my mom would sing around the house, too shy to sing in public, outside hanging the clothes. And so I was always surrounded by great music.
So when did you first start kind of getting into it seriously? Did you have formal training? When did you start playing with others?
Well, like I said, 2, started beating on it, probably about 4 or 5. I think when I was in 3rd grade, like I said, our neighborhood was golden. We had all nationalities, all types of people, and we all got along. I think you and I had talked about it before when we first started speaking about how I don't understand if we're supposed to be so evolved, how it seems like we're going backward. It seems like the neighborhood that I lived in then was like the neighborhood should be today, but I digress. That's a whole nother interview and conversation. But I was very fortunate. Across the street was a lady, a white lady, lived across the street in a fourplex. And I took about 3 years of classical piano from her. And I really, really enjoyed that. And I did a bunch of recitals. And I don't remember this, but my mom said I would throw up before, which is better than throwing up during. And every time you reach a certain level, you would get another bust of the great classical composers, Bach, Chopin, whatever. And I had a whole slew of those. And so that was it. Then in 4th grade, I said I did 3 years of that. But in between that, during that period, in 4th grade, I got a guitar. I got an acoustic, and I learned George Harrison and the Beatles and Ray Charles and what have you. And then we went to a pawn shop, and I got an electric guitar, and I'm like, ooh, this is it. And in 5th grade, I wanted to be in the school band. I was attending Barrett Elementary School in Denver. It's about 3-4 blocks from our house. And back in those days, it was a beautiful thing. They had loaner instruments. And the kids, I'm sure there's always some everywhere in every era, but it seemed like the kids had a little bit more empathy and sympathy for their parents. And I was grateful that, they bought me the 2 guitars, whatever, and I was taking piano lessons. So I knew they didn't have the money to buy me another instrument. And so the day that they gave out the main instruments, I was out with a freaking sore throat, right? So the next day when I went, the only instrument they had left was a baritone horn. And I was like, cool, give it to me. It was brass, and with the case was actually almost bigger than I was. But I slept at home every day, and I became second chair and loved it. And it served me so well. And something that I didn't even realize until much later on in life, actually, was when I had been with Earth, Wind & Fire for a few years and had done some productions and stuff like that. And a young guy back east in D.C. came up to me, and we were talking. He said, well, I was checking you out, and I saw in your history that you played baritone horn. And, and I was figuring it out in your arrangements. they're so beautiful. I know that had a lot to do with it because the baritone horn plays those gorgeous secondary melodies, and I was like, wow, thank you for telling me who I am. And so that was a great thing. I played that throughout high school, junior high, high school, actually elementary, and then all the way on. So anyway, you still there?
I'm here.
All right.
That gave you maybe some of the coloring that you brought to your keyboard arrangements.
Absolutely. That, and then, being with Earth, Wind and Fire, and of course, Charles Stepney, and Maurice was good at that too. And then, okay, so anyway, then in the 6th grade, I got an organ. And boy, that was something, because my older brother and my younger brother and myself, we had a band called the Big D3. And so we thought that we were going to get gigantic amplifiers, because it was just me playing the guitar. I was playing guitar then, electric guitar, and singing, which I can't even fathom that anymore. And my older brother, who was always, he was like 6'5", but even then I think he was at least 6 feet. And we made a real ghetto drum set. We had a tambourine, old tambourine. We ripped off all the little jingles, and we attached it to like a wire hanger from your closet, some kind of rigged it, and stuck it into the bottom half of a music stand that you would use to read it, but we didn't need the top, just the bottom. That was a snare and a cymbal that was about 5 inches in diameter. It's pathetic. That's about it. And here's this big kid sitting behind that, and my younger brother Stephen was hilarious because he was left-handed. He would hold the acoustic guitar that I used to have and kind of just, stand there and chew gum. He was so cute. Now he's turned out to be an incredible composer and arranger and drummer, and did most of the drum work on our stuff, Into the Journey and the Larry Dunn Orchestra stuff. At any rate, so we're thinking that we're going to get big amplifiers, right? So, Christmas Eve, the kids we'd sneak out into the living room when mom and dad were asleep. At least we hoped they were. And we saw this big, just sheet covering just something humongous. And we were like, oh, there's some amplifiers. Well, Christmas morning we came out and they unveiled it, and it was a Kimball organ for Larry. Oh my. Thank God, my brothers and I are still very much brothers. But I know that was something for them, and it was absolutely life-changing for me. And I would take my father's Jimmy Smith and Kenny Burrell records, put them on the turntable, and turn the turntable down from 33 1/3 to 16. And and then I actually had a band with myself and Hilliard Wilson, Larry Thompson on drums. Hilliard still is with me today. And I saw Larry when we got to Denver they inducted me, Andrew Woolfolk, and Philip Bailey in the Colorado Music Hall of Fame on November 28th. So I got to see Larry, and I was talking to Hilliard at NAMM the other day. Our dream is to do something together again. At any rate, I was 11 years old, and Hilliard and Larry were 13. And we had a great, basically instrumental band. We had a tenor sax, alto sax, me on organ, Hilliard on bass, Larry Thompson on drums, and a guitar player. I can't remember what his name was. And we were doing stuff like Hugh Masekela, Grazing in the Grass, and Jimmy Smith, the Cat, and stuff like that. And then 2 years later, we went to a place where the young kids got to go and play and hear music. And we saw another band and had 3 young guys sitting on stools, and they were singing. I'm pretty sure I remember it was Curtis Mayfield, In the Shadows. In the shadows. They don't get to that certain part, break out to beautiful 3-part harmony. And one of those singers was Philip Bailey. Philip Bailey, Carl Caldwell, and Winston, can't remember his last name. No, Julius Carey, actually. And so we snatched them up with us, And so we were doing everything from James Brown to the Temptations, the Moments, the Stylistics, and then as time went on, Santana. I mean, on and on and on.
What was the quality of Philip's singing at that point?
Oh, Philip was always, he was always Philip. Way back then, I remember a young lady that we used to go to school with, and she talking to me one time. She said, "Oh, you guys are so good," and Philip's voice is it's like an angel, so beautiful. So hey, man, and then eventually we were doing Battle of the Bands, and ironically enough, when we did when we got inducted, Philip and I were there in Denver in November, and it was at this Paramount Theater downtown, which is the same theater that we won a couple of the Battle of the Band things at.
That's pretty cool.
It was. And so by the time I was 15, my little Italian mom, pops had split when I was about 13. And, so we were playing 7 nights a week in this 21 and over nightclub. I'm 15 years old. And groups like the Whispers and Young Hope Trio and Bobby Lyle and certain artists would come through there. And they were like, who are these little boys? But the level, we were like little kids, but we were playing on an adult level for sure. We would rehearse during the day, if we weren't in school, and even after school, we'd rehearse before playing that night. And, I used to love it. They had a B3 organ there because by that time, my little Kimball organ had about 13 keys broken off of it because Harriet's mother owned a janitorial service, and Harriet would work his little butt off with her, and if he was good and worked enough, then she would let him use the van to cart around our equipment. And the organ would tilt and pop a key here, pop a key there, and so just in perfect timing, when we started playing at the club, they had a B3, and I was beside myself.
So Larry, just to set the time frame, this is like late 60s?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what was the music scene like overall in that part of the country, would you say, during that era?
Oh, yeah, well, it was great. And like I said, plus I had, my father's jazz collection and him and my mother, like I said, back then, I don't really, at least with us, there wasn't really a generation gap. We all knew good music. Like I said, here I am 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, whatever, listening to Jimmy Smith, Kenny Burrell, Milt Jackson, on and on and on. And my mother's Frank Sinatra records. Actually, it was her and my dad. And then also my mom had 78's Italian Tarantella. And then we didn't have a lot of jazz stuff. Well, we did have some stations. But so, for example, I knew about Ramsey Lewis and certain artists. I personally didn't really find out that much about like Herbie. I knew a little bit about Herbie. Yeah, I knew Herbie, but I didn't know about McCoy Tyner and Wynton Kelly and what's the other great? I got the whole box set. Starts with an A. Jazz pianist. No. Nothing. Anyway, I digress. And then Santana came out, and we were playing everything. Like I said, the Rolling Stones, just all different types of music. And then the Jimi Hendrix and the Cream, 10 years after, all that different stuff. We went to a concert up in Red Rocks, Colorado. I think that's the first time I ever had a headache because the music was so freaking loud, and we liked it, we loved it. But
even outdoors, wow.
Oh yeah, the beautiful Red Rocks up in the mountains. It's a beautiful place. And so yeah, that was just awesome. And then we went to the first rock festival at the stadium, and we all knew about the groups, and it was like I said, 10 years after, again, Cream, the main ones, and then the headliner was Jimi Hendrix.
So you saw Hendrix.
I got two stories on that. So he was getting ready to come on, and way across the football field, you could see him walking out with the other two guys, and he had the headband on and a guitar, like, oh, yeah. But, I would never forget when I first walked into that stadium, hearing that style of rock guitar and stuff, it was like I was in a different universe. Because we're used to playing jazz and R&B and pop and the Beatles and that kind of stuff. And so when that happened with the Hendrix style stuff and rock guitars and all that, it was like I was on a different planet. But we liked it. We loved it. And so, yeah, it was just awesome. We were just little kids, basically. And then the same band was me and Hilliard, Phillip, Larry, all the guys, Carl. We went to a house in Denver during the daytime. It was a big, outside party. And we had a band. The band was there. We're playing. And then Jimi freaking Hendrix shows up.
At the house?
Puts his guitar case down. And he opens it up. And he takes out his guitar. And he's walking up there, getting ready. We're going to set in with freaking Jimi Hendrix. And some disgruntled, miserable son of a gun had called the police. That's right. Shake your head some more, Scotty. And
wow.
So the police came and game over. He very quietly put his guitar in the case, closed it, and walked away. Oh, Jimmy. Really, people?
He should have stayed in New York or England.
Huh?
He was probably thinking he shouldn't have left England or New York.
For real. But yeah, that was, you talk about heart-wrenching. Really? Put that on your resume.
That's like...
Played with Jimi Hendrix. I don't care if it was 8 bars. Played with Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
So, so all that was going on. That was like, what, maybe 67, 68. And I believe it was 69. The genius historians like yourself probably know. Marvin Gaye, what's going on?
Yep.
My. At this point, we had a band named Friends and Love. It was a bunch of us cats from Denver, and then we had 2 white guys from Philadelphia. Steve Sykes, funky boy. He was, I should tell you, I said, that's why they wrote that song later, played that funky music, white boy. And him and I are still buddies. He is a great engineer. I did some production in a group called Real Tight, and Luis and I actually had called him, and he did the mix for us and with us. But he's back to playing guitar as well. And then there was the sax player. Both of them were 2 guys from Philly. Greg something, and he was doing the record thing way back then. And we used to play at this place in Colorado up in the mountains called the Hornbook, out in Boulder, Colorado, the Hornbook Inn. Turn it out. And it's amazing because, people were smoking marijuana and drinking and everything. They had them little bar tables. And at the end of the night, people would be standing on top of them, yet nobody fell and cracked their head. It was the divine order or something. And so that was very deep. But let me go back a little bit. One thing that was very important. When I was 13 years old, my uncle on my mom's side, my Italian uncle, was the janitor for the Denver Arena downtown Denver, Colorado. And lo and behold, he got me into my first big concert at 13. It was James Brown. Okay?
Wow.
James Brown. And hey, I'd been playing his music since I was 11. And man, it just, I was just blown away. And I said, you know what, I'm going to be on that stage one day. And it almost happened. It did happen, but it didn't happen because they tore that place down. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, but 5 years later, I was on that stage. It was the Coliseum, though.
Nice.
18,000 people in Denver. But I remember, man, To see James Brown dance is one thing. To see him live is another. But the first time I had ever seen a strobe light, and they had not one, they had two, and they were industrial. And they turned those things on and turned the lights off, and it looked like he was just floating across the stage. I was like, oh my God, Home Alone. And then when it was over, everybody exited, and my uncle had to clean up, and there was nobody in there. Me, my uncle, and again, you might know, the saxophone, the baritone sax player, tall guy, had the little gray streak right in the middle of his head. And I said, okay, I'm going. I went down there and I said, hi, I'm Larry Dunn. I play organ. I would love to play with you guys. And he looked at me and said, you know, kid, I bet you could really play. And he did the epilogue with this. And you know, if it wasn't for the fact that James thinks he could play the organ, we might have been able to do something. And I was like, whatever. I'm going to keep it moving. You will see me again. And so, yeah, that was life-changing.
Wow. That's awesome. My first concert was the Eagles. My sister. Not quite as funky.
What year was that?
72.
70 what?
72.
72. That was my second year out in Los Angeles to be with Earth, Wind, and Fire.
All right. So amazing experiences.
How did I get in Earth, Wind, and Fire? Is that the one?
Yeah. Somehow, one way or another, Maurice White saw you guys.
All right. So we were always abreast of stuff. And I think we even did one or two of the songs. We were familiar with the first go around of Earth, Wind, and Fire. And for those who don't know, Maurice was actually a session drummer and jazz drummer, then became jazz drummer for Ramsey Lewis Trio.
Mm-hmm.
And but him, Charles Stepney, and I would imagine Tom, I don't know. Maybe Tom hadn't come along yet, but whatever, Charles Stepney, and there was Satterfield, Maurice, they were all doing those great sessions at Chess Records in Chicago, the Dells and Rotary Connection, Ramsey, all that. So anyway, Earth, Wind, and Fire came to Denver, and we had a conduit, Perry Jones, who actually claimed to fame as discovering me and Philip and Prince, and he was a real. Actually, we saw Perry in November when we were there. He was an A&R guy for Warner Brothers, so that's how he knew Maurice, and so it all kind of got interconnected. But anyway, so Earth, Wind, and Fire with Maurice and the older guys and Sherry Scott was doing a performance in Denver, Colorado at the Hilton Hotel. It was an afternoon gig. And so our band, Friends in Love, opened the show for them. And so, of course, Perry was very close with them because Warner Brothers. And so that evening, after the gig was done there at the Hilton, Maurice and Verdine came down to the little nightclub we were playing at. They had a little round stage that would just go around in a circle, and it had to be three in the guys. So that's how we made that connection. About a year later, if that, they broke up, we broke up, and Philip came out to Los Angeles and became musical director for a gospel group called the Stovall Sisters. And Maurice in the meantime was going in through many, many different musicians and keyboard players and whatever, everything. Philip came back to Denver, and at this point I was playing with another bar band, Sammy Mayfield, a young guy whose mom had passed when he was 12 years old, and he's still around, blues playing mother figure and singer. And but I told him the same thing. I said, look, the only way I'll be in your band is we got to rehearse. Always the R word. He's like, cool, and we did. So anyway, Philip came back to Denver just to hang out. You know, his wife went to Manual High School. Me and Philip went to East. So the group War was performing again, I don't know what this is, in the afternoon at Manual High School. So Philip was in the audience,
So
and so Sammy Mayfield band, we opened for them. So I took like a 10-minute Hammond B3 organ solo and just wiped it out. And Philip went to the phone. There was no cell phones there unless you were with the FBI. And he put in a whole bunch of money, and he called Maurice in Los Angeles and said, hey, I think we might have the guy, man. You know, he can really play, you know, and he's a nice guy, you know. Doesn't have a lot of experience later on in life. I said, don't you ever tell anybody no crap like that. I was playing nightclubs when I was still smelling like Similac behind my ears. Remind me to tell you about that, the Big D3, when we won the talent show at the casino ballroom on the 5 Points. So anyway, Maurice was like, cool. So Maurice flew me out. In the meantime, I acquired a 73 key stage model Fender Rhodes, the one with the legs, not the suitcase model. There was some Hispanic brothers that had one, and they said they would sell it. And when I said, oh, it was hot. No, it was hot. They wanted, I think, $75 or $100. I'm like, hey, I got $25. Okay.
Wow.
So I jokingly say, if they ever saw me again in life and remember, they go, hey, Bato, you know, we're proud of you, man. But we want 52 years of interest. But yeah, that was deep. So anyway, I learned, because, you know, I spoke with Maurice and stuff. So I had a couple, 3 weeks. So in a little apartment. So I learned all of Earth, Wind & Fire's first 2 albums on Warner Brothers by ear. And I flew out. Verdine picked me up. Almost got both of us killed going up what I know now to be Century Boulevard. Had a piano in the back and had this green van, dark green van. And he's going over to get in the turning lane. I'm like, okay. Then he keeps going over one lane, and he's going in oncoming traffic, head on. And very much Magooish, he's cussing them out. And I'm like, Verdine, you're in the wrong lane. Anyway, through the grace of God, we made it up to him and Maurice's house. And we whipped out the piano. It was just Maurice and Verdine. And so Verdine whipped out his bass, and Maurice was just sitting there and went over some of the Earth, Wind & Fire stuff. And then I said, let me show him I can go places. So I went into a little bit of Herbie Hancock, Maiden Voyage. And the rest, as they say, was history.
Wow. So, Larry, what were your first impressions of both Maurice and Verdine?
Well, like I said, I had the good blessing to meet them in Denver. And like I said, we already knew their music. And I was just in awe. You know, but Verdine, because I had dinner a couple of weeks ago with my wife, and I and Verdine and Ray Parker and his wife, and then Verdine, our buddy that we did some recording with, DJ Cassidy, young guy, and his girlfriend. Verdine's wife had to stay home because her mother was staying there. But anyway, Verdine, we always tell the story. He was telling the young kid, DJ Cassidy, that when Verdine and I first met each other, we both looked at each other, and we didn't say it out loud, just to ourselves. We went, damn, he's skinny. And DJ Cassidy looked at Verdine and said, it has never changed. But, you know, and I was in awe. And I loved immediately Verdine's bass playing and the whole thing. Now, Maurice wasn't that great of a vocalist on those first 2 albums. But what I did love is that I could hear the evolution starting, you know, because most records that you heard up until Earth, Wind & Fire, and especially when we got deeper into it, the drums, even with Motown, the drums were great, but the drums were just a beat. It was just a rhythm. It wasn't until after, because Maurice was a drummer, and then especially, you know, with Massenburg and all that, where the freaking bass drum hits you in the chest, and and the bass, and, you know, that real punch. It was a different type of wall of sound. I know we had, what's the guy that so-called invented the
Phil Spector.
Right. That was one, but Earth, Wind and Fire, there was a different wall of sound, because that the kick drum, and then with those high mids on it, but the low end was just an awesome thing. And then so to be able to work with them, it was a great thing. And then I had written a little bit in Colorado, but nothing like after I started doing out here.
So what a huge change for you. I think what were you, 19?
Pardon me?
What were you, 19 years old?
I was 15 when I met Maurice, or 16, and I was 17. Actually, I just turned 18 when I flew out here to join the band.
So, and then you also started living in LA as well?
Never to return again, but to Denver. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, what a just incredible change, 18 and in this huge up and coming band. I mean,
right.
You were living the life, man.
Well, but the thing was, like I tell people today, and it doesn't matter, old, young, alike. So many people want to choose a vocation predicated. Oh, let me see. Oh, doctors make a lot of money, or an attorney. I'd always tell people, I said, look, first of all, do something that you enjoy doing. And of course, if it's something that can help others, even better. But most jobs are helping others. Absolutely. But the thing was, people would say to me, wow, that must have really, been or this, or I said, no, not really, because I kind of always knew since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. Because we weren't kidding. Like I said, now a lot of people, why do you I want to be famous. What the fudge? Mm-hmm. I saw some stupid guy, God bless him, but he was stupid. This guy was in his 50s or something, and his girlfriend, 15 years or something, or 11, never married her, and he's up there like, I want to be an actor. All of a sudden, you want to be an actor, and I know what's going to happen. I'm trying to get my famous on, and that's the problem. People want fame, but they don't even understand there's certain stuff that comes along with that. And like I said, I think because I was prepared, I never tripped. I remember being 19 years old, and people, young brothers down south, would come up to me and, oh, Larry Dunn, man, you the baddest keyboard player in the world. You're my idol. I said, stop. I'm 19. I said, stop. First of all, no man should be another man's idol. God is God, and God creates everybody. Whatever it is you see in me that's tickling your fancy, you have the same thing. You just have to work on it. I said, but there's things in me that you don't see that ain't so cool that I have to work on.
Right.
And as far as being the baddest keyboard player in the world, again, no such thing. Damn, I remember saying that when I was 9. I said, like, I forgot what I used. I said, for somebody, Glenn Campbell's keyboard player may be the baddest keyboard or the best keyboard player in the world. So, these are blurred lines there. And, a lot of them did get it. Some of them had that look like, okay, gotta go. But
yeah, best is totally subjective.
Right, absolutely. But I always tell people the story. We were rehearsing out at the Warner Brothers lot, and I guess they had just shot a Pepsodent commercial. And they had these huge freaking teeth, man. There was a whole set of teeth that was probably, I'm not exaggerating, probably at least 6 to 8 feet high. Not 68, 6 to 8. In some way, kind of, goofy me, I got on top of them and was walking around. And I just remember when I was walking around up there, we just finished rehearsing or whatever, and I was like, this is going to be really big. And of course, at 18 years old, you compare to what? Now, of course, I'm not that stupid to say, oh, I knew that. There's no way that nobody knew that the music would still be living on. Here we are 50 years later.
Yeah, what an amazing ride. So
that is,
when you got with them and you were starting to, coalesce, What mostly did you do first? Were you mostly rehearsing? Did you do any live gigs? Did you go right into the studio? What happened?
Excellent questions. I have no answer. No. Actually, it was pretty deep. Maurice had a vision, and god dang it, he was going to stick to it, and rightfully so. He had this thing that, if we start taking these little gigs at Osco's or these little clubs around LA,
I remember Oscars.
right?
Yeah.
Osco's,
Disco. Yeah.
yeah, and a couple other ones. He's like, that's gonna kind of mess up the mystique. He always had to what's good about mystique. And he said, plus, now this is funny, just because of the time, the same people that would pay $2 or $3.50 or something, $5 to see you at Osco's, they ain't gonna pay $15 to see you at the Forum. Wow, $15. Actually, I've seen some of those pictures in the Earth, Wind and Fire Legacy page with the ticket. Earth, Wind and Fire live in concert, $10,
Yeah.
$9, right? But so what we did is Philip and I had a little apartment that we lived in together, and we would. He started studying percussion with a guy. God, what was his name? There was a short nickname, Todd or something like that. I don't remember. And he would, he's just learning the tones. Because a lot of people just beat on. Oh, I'm a conga player. No, you're not. How to draw those tones out and different stuff. And he also had a little raggedy. I'm gonna get these raggedy pianos. A little raggedy Wurlitzer. And I would listen to McCoy Tyner and different stuff. I said, I'm gonna get this stuff. And we would basically just, practice every day. And then Maurice gave us enough dough. I remember one time we were pretty hungry, so we had one. Not they didn't have that super crap, just a regular little old can of Campbell's chili soup, they call it, but it was chili. And so we split it in half. And I was taking Philip's lead. We put it exactly in half. And then he took some cheese and sprinkled it on it, cheddar cheese. So I did the same. Then he put a bunch of crackers on it and then topped it off with some ketchup and mixed it all together. We were happy as two pigs and you know what. And it's okay, we'd do that. And then if we weren't doing that, then we would be having rehearsals with Earth, Wind and Fire. Rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. And, that's what I tell people. I said, look, man, you take away Clive Davis and the record deal. You take away Faison and the choreography. You take away Doug Henning and Copperfield and the magic tricks. You take away Bill Whitten and the wonderful outfits and all this stuff and the lighting and the sound. And the deal is no secret. We rehearsed our butts off. Okay? And it was none of this, hey, man, I got to get out of here. Bye. And, now that I've got the Larry Dunn Orchestra, and, in the past, I've had a couple of younger brothers, and I had to get on them because, we were rehearsing at this church where my good pastor buddy lets us rehearse. And I look out and where we're on the stage. I look out there and I see this young guy, great talent, and he's on the phone. Man, I'm over here rehearsing with Larry Dunn. I got right on him. I said, no, you're not. You're supposed to, but you're not rehearsing with me. You're on the phone. And I told him, I said, look, man, maybe that's why there's not a lot of great bands anymore. Because there's so many freaking distractions. I said, we didn't have no damn phones. Really? I said, I don't even think we had a watch. Mm-hmm. It was about the freaking music.
Definitely too many distractions today.
Oh my God. Everybody, this is the whole life is this, and like I said, technology, everything has a purpose. There you go.
Yeah. So because no expense spared on graphics here, there's the former Earth, Wind and Fire and then the Larry Dunn era Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Hey. Wow. What book? What is that? Maurice's book?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have that. Yeah. Yeah. That was the great.
And that's you right next to Maurice there.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Well, still with the big head and the big hair. Actually, my wife just cut my hair. She said it was getting too long. I'm like, whatever.
But
yeah, man, it
barber
was
myself.
a wild ride. And let me digress and go back to one thing that I skipped over when I said me and my two brothers had the big D3. We had these black shirts, turtlenecks, and it was black, red, and white. Right here, the rest was black. And it was at the casino ballroom. There was an area. It's gentrification, but there was an area in Denver called the Five Points. It was uberly famous, and it was called the Five Points because there was one section there where actually 5 corners met. Usually it's always 4 corners, but there was 5 corners. They named it the Five Points, and they had such clubs as the Rossonian, the casino ballroom, which is they had a talent show down there. So the big D3 were one of the competitors. And so my mom was there, my dad was there, and us. And we won 3rd place. And that's when I was playing See the Girl with the Red Dress. To this day, like I said, I just can't believe that I was singing. Nowadays, I mean, I can sing very well enough to yell at singers and tell them what I want them to sing.
Was that before your voice changed?
As a producer. But so I was like, wow, really? I get to stay up. Let me get this right. I get to stay up late with the adults. I get to do music. Wow. We won 3rd place. We got a picture in the newspaper. And I got $12.
Wow.
Remember Steve Martin and the Jerk?
Yeah.
I heard my first Mantovani record. And I said to myself, these are my people. This is my music. Oh, yeah. That was another tentpole or milestone or life-changing event. Because I was like, really? I would do this for free. Of course, that's what all musicians say. I would do this for free. But to be able to, and then, like I said, and stay up with the adults late. So I was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do.